Impact. Real human interest stories ranging from the ordinary to the truly extraordinary.
Disclaimer. The opinions expressed by the guest and interviewee and those providing comments are theirs alone and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of VX3 Exchange or any employee thereof. VX3 Exchange is not responsible for accuracy of any of the information supplied by the guest. It is not the intention of VX3 Exchange to malign any community, religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
Hello, this is Fatima Husain, and you're listening to Season 2 of Impact, the program which introduces you to extraordinary human interest stories from around Canada. In 2011, a 17-year-old Khadija Gayle gave birth to a baby boy. Soon enough, she began to realize that there was something wrong. King J, as the baby was lovingly called, began to lose his eyesight, his growth stunted, and appearance aged. J began to show symptoms of a rare disease, Cockayne Syndrome. It was a difficult path to tread for Khadija, as she believes that her son's case was the only one in Toronto at the time. Khadija did all she could, battling against a commonly unknown disease that was left undiagnosed for a while. Today, Khadija is trying to encourage dialogue and raise awareness amongst communities around this rare syndrome.
My name's Khadija and I'm the proud mom of Jayshawn Isaiah Gayle, best known as King J. I was 17 when I found out that I was pregnant and I was shocked. I was insanely shocked, but I knew from the beginning that I was going to keep him and hopefully have the support of my family and my friends. The first person that I told was my best friend, and her reaction, she was excited for me, nervous but excited. And then I told my mom, who from the beginning, although was disappointed, supported me. She had my back 100%. Luckily, I went to a Catholic school. They were actually really excited too, because I imagine at the time I was only in grade 12. My brother didn't talk to me for an entire year. He didn't talk to me until I brought Jay home. But for the most part, a lot of people had my back. So brought Jay home literally the next day and everything was perfect. Everything was fine. He was literally perfection. I can't even begin to explain. The way he looked, the way he smelled, like literally, I was the proudest mom ever. But I would say by the time he was a week, I noticed his eyes. It's almost like he didn't have control over his eyes. And I brought him to the doctor. And actually the first doctor said that everything was fine. He's just a newborn. But I knew something was off. So then I brought him to a pediatrician and she said that something's definitely wrong. That's when we found out that he was born with cataracts. I was honestly devastated because my perfect little baby, I still viewed as perfect, had one little imperfection. I was being told that he would probably never be able to drive and see things the way I do, but honestly, it was okay. I cried, but it was okay because at the end of the day, like, this is just something small. Keep on going. By the time he was 4 months, they were saying that his head wasn't growing the way it should be. His head was smaller than it should have been, and they couldn't explain why. By the time he was 6 months, his weight wasn't changing the way it should have been. He was staying the same size, and that was another issue that he had, because now they can't explain to me why my kid's not growing. He stayed little. By the time he was 1.5, that's when he just lost interest in food. It's almost like he didn't care to eat. So my 1.5-year-old was the size of a 6-month-old. He didn't walk, he didn't talk, he didn't crawl. He wasn't meeting the typical milestones, and no one could tell me why. And it was honestly devastating because my child was so different. And imagine at the time, I'm seeing other babies around me, babies in my family who are maybe, let's say, a year younger than him, but they're accomplishing more than he is. And literally no one could tell me why. It was probably the most frustrating thing ever because you feel helpless. You're wondering, like, why my kid, you know? Everything that happened, I cried over it. I definitely cried over it, but I just took it for what it was and kept it moving because at the end of the day, like, he's here, he's happy. He doesn't notice his differences. I might notice it, you might notice it, but he doesn't notice it. And we had each other. Nothing else really mattered. Jay was the only one in Toronto that was diagnosed with Cockayne Syndrome. I heard that it was 1 in every 500,000 births. So I literally was wondering, why my kid? Why him? Cockayne Syndrome is, the way I describe it, it's like he was aging like a little old man. He had difficulties that an elderly person would have. So for example, with his vision, being born with cataracts, he had hearing loss. His joints and muscles were really stiff. Hair loss too. He started losing his hair probably when he was like 1.5. The diagnosis affects everyone differently, but like luckily he never had seizures or anything like that. He was just, I would say the best way to describe Jay, it's almost like a kid kid that stayed like an 8-month-old. Literally, it's almost like he had the mind of an 8-month-old. He can roll around and get things, and he knew like right from wrong in a sense, but he just stayed little. After he was diagnosed, it's crazy too, because I was told not to go on Google. And I promise you, that is all I did. I stayed on Google and I Googled pictures of different kids and their life expectancies and how it affected them. And I cried. I don't think I've ever cried more in my entire life. And it's crazy too, because when I think back to it, Jay was right beside me. He was right beside me sleeping, and I was beside him bawling, because getting a diagnosis, as much as I wanted it, is now accepting the fact that my child's gonna die and there is nothing I can do about it. Literally nothing I can do about it. I can't slow it down. I literally can't do anything. And I think that was the hardest part, to accept the fact that his diagnosis was what it was. No parent, and at the time I was 21, no parent wants to hear that they're gonna lose their child. And I was looking up different ways as to how they died, and I found out that the most common cause of death is pneumonia or kidney failure. I feel like one of the hardest things about Jay being the only one in Toronto with this diagnosis is the fact that I have no one to go to. I have like the doctors, if I mention his diagnosis, 9 times out of 10 don't know what I'm talking about, and they themselves have to Google it and figure it out. And then there's no one around me that can relate to what I'm going through. I feel like if I had the support, it would have been a lot easier, and that's why I'm very grateful that after he got diagnosed, I found out about this Cockayne Syndrome Share and Care Network that is out of the States, and they gave us the opportunity to go there and meet other families and meet other kids. And it became a big part of like my healing process, because accepting that diagnosis is hands down one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because you almost feel delusional in a sense, because you just don't want to believe that it's your child's reality, and realistically it is. The lack of awareness when it comes to this syndrome, I would say definitely, it was just frustrating in a sense. It was frustrating that, for example, like if you have something like cancer or something, there's so many resources that are there for you. With a diagnosis like Jay's, like there's nothing. There's literally nothing. There's no one to go to. There's no one doing research on it. There's no one. It's almost like you just have to let your kid go through life the way they go through life and see what you get. One of the hardest things I would say when it comes to Jay's diagnosis and some of the hurdles that I had to overcome was being a young mom, and especially me. Like I have the ultimate baby face. So I'm an 18, 19-year-old and I'm bringing in my kid and I'm ready to talk business. Like what's going on with him? And no one really takes you seriously because of how young I am. I literally demand respect, because at the end of the day, God gave me a child that can't speak for himself. And it's my job to stand up to any and everybody and defend him. And I did that. And I felt like a lot of the time I wasn't being taken seriously. My questions weren't being taken seriously, or people were almost looking to my mom. If she came to an appointment with me, they were almost looking to my mom as if it was my mom that was taking care of my child. And a lot of people assumed that. I feel like I was being ignored by the medical professionals, but also like everyday people. Like I remember a situation where I brought Jade to the grocery store with my mom, and someone said to her like, you know, you're doing good with the baby, good job with the baby. And it was just like, this is my kid. I'm doing a good job with my kid. But even my family too. I have family members that said, oh, the baby's looking nice, good job, and thank my mom or like acknowledge my mom. But it's just like, wait a minute, like I'm doing these overnight shifts with him. Jay's illness was, a lot of people were left confused, because it's not often you see, like for example, at his healthiest, I would say he was 4 years old, and he's 4 years old, but he's still the size of a 6-month-old. He still has the mental function of a 6 to 8-month-old. And I would say a lot of people were confused and surprised as to how he was 4 years old, but still so little. But at the same time, they were supportive of him. They genuinely wished him the best. They were hoping for a better outcome in a sense. People loved Jay. Jay was literally the friendliest kid ever. Like this was someone who would go to the store and want to hold on to random strangers and be carried around by them. I recall a situation on the bus where Jay was sitting in his stroller and someone across from me asked how old he was. And I said he was 3. And they looked at me like I was literally crazy. 3? Are you sure he's 3? Yeah, I know the age of my child. He's 3. I understand the confusion because he's 3, but he looks so small. So I get it. But when your facial expression is looking at me crazy and your body language is almost turned off, it's so easy for me to take offense, because at the end of the day, you're talking about my 3-year-old. You're looking at my 3-year-old like he's something weird, disrespectful in a sense. My coping mechanism when it comes to everything that Jay went through, first I cried a lot, but then, for example, like with everything that happened, starting with his eyes and then going on to something else, like I would cry about one thing and then like, I'd accept it. Like, honestly, Deja, like it is what it is. It's okay. He's fine. He's happy. He doesn't realize it's okay. And then something else would happen. Then I'd cry again and talk myself out of it again. And then it just got to the point where like we have each other. Nothing else matters. The breaking point for me was when I heard that his hearing was like little to nothing. And at the end of the day, he's happy and he's here. Nothing else matters. And I think after that, anything else that came to me or came to him, I took it with a grain of salt, accepted it, and kept it moving, because Jay honestly did not notice. That kid was happy. I can't stress and complain or cry over like what society might think of him. And I think that's something I really did in the beginning. Like, oh, he's not gonna be like everyone else. Feel sorry for him. But no, if he's happy with himself and I'm happy with who he is and how he is, literally no one can talk to him. I had him on a schedule from the beginning. He went to daycare. I'd pick him up from daycare. He'd have physio. Jay was literally perfect. At the end of 2016, Jay was getting testing done, and I remember the call. I picked him up and I brought him to his pediatrician, and she told me to bring him to the hospital. I brought him to the hospital, and that's when I found out that he, one, had pneumonia, which I definitely didn't know. I think my heart broke at that moment because I knew that pneumonia was one of the most common causes of death for CS kids. And then number two, that his kidneys seemed to be failing. And again, another common cause of death for kids with Cockayne Syndrome. So I was literally terrified. I was terrified because there was no way that this was going to be the end of it all. It was really an emotional roller coaster. One of my biggest regrets is that in the hospital that day, they gave him a lot of fluid because, again, like doctors will look at a piece of paper and want to diagnose your kid or say what they need or what they don't need. But this specific day, this doctor didn't come and meet Jay. So he didn't know that although it says 6 years old on a piece of paper, Jay is tiny. Jay is literally the size of a 6-month-old, 7-month-old maybe. And the doctor gave them the okay to give Jay an amount of fluid. Now, just to put things in perspective, Jay was G-tube fed, and I would say I gave him maybe 900 milliliters of liquid for the day. This doctor wanted Jay to get, and when I say in a day, like Jay would get 900 milliliters of fluid in 24 hours. This doctor wanted them to give him like half of that in one shot. This will always be one of my biggest regrets, because in the moment I said to them, are you guys sure you want to do that? Like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, that's a lot. And they gave him the fluid, and Jay, he like couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe. It was too much on his chest. It was too much for him. Because remember, his kidneys are failing. His feet were already swollen. Now he's swollen everywhere because it's too much liquid for someone that's that little. And I knew that. I should have stopped it. And I don't know why I didn't stop it, because they just kept on saying, well, he's dehydrated, so he needs it. I honestly should have known better, because a 6-year-old that is the size of a 6-year-old would have needed it and would have been okay with it. But someone as little as Jay should have got that fluid slowly over a long period of time. I can't be mad at the doctor in a sense, because they didn't see what Jay looked like. They're looking at a piece of paper and saying what a child needs based off of a piece of paper. And after that, my kid was not the same. He ended up staying at the hospital for another 2 months. And then one of the hardest things that I feel like I had to accept was the fact that his kidneys were not going to get better. And I made the choice not to do dialysis. So realistically, with no kidneys, you're going to die. I remember talking to doctors, and the doctors saying, do you want to stay here or do you want to go somewhere else that's more comfortable? And I just kept on saying, okay, well, can we go home? Because if he gets to go home, like, and then we could just come back later. Like, it's almost like I didn't understand that my kid was going to pass. Can he go back to daycare? Like, those were the type of questions I was asking, because it was just going right over my head. I saw my baby boy. Like, that's literally all I saw. I saw my son. I didn't see a dying kid. Everyone around me knew that he was gonna pass, but I feel like it just wasn't clicking for me. And then I finally made the choice and said that I wanted to go to end of life care. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Jay got to go home for a week in April of 2017 from there, and he wasn't himself. Honestly, bringing Jay home was something I was so excited to do, because he hasn't been home in so long. So I was gonna see if he did the things that he normally did, like roll into the kitchen and open the cupboards and and I was so excited to see these things. And he didn't. He went home and he literally just like laid there. Like home didn't feel like home anymore. So I was ready to take him into the end of life care facility, and that became home very quickly. The nurses there, the doctors there, everyone was literally perfect and so loving towards him and me and supportive. He was there from April to November. He got to celebrate his 6th birthday there on October 1st. They threw him a barbecue in the summer. I graduated that year. I don't know how, but I graduated that year. They threw me a surprise graduation party, and my son peacefully passed on November 14th with me literally right by his side. If I could have, and in a sense I did, plan my son's death, and it went exactly how I wanted it to go. I am so at peace with everything. I'm just at peace. He passed at 6:34 on November 14th of 2017. The place that we were staying at ordered pizza, and I was able to call my friends and my family who came, and we made a lot of jokes. As weird as it might sound, my child was laying on the bed, and me and my friends and my family were just laughing about who he was, how funny he was. Like, we just have so many memories. When it came to him, it was hard because I had to call my mom, and my mom was who I called first, and let her know what happened, and we cried together. And then it was just like, you know what? He's at peace. And although it's a sad reality, I'm happy for him, because when you truly love someone, like truly love someone, it's not about you. If Jay had stayed with me any longer, it would have been insanely selfish of me. At the time, he lost so much weight. He wasn't even himself. He was at his healthiest wearing 18 to 24 month clothes, and now right when he's about to die, he can fit into newborn stuff. Newborn stuff are even too big for him. Like, this is someone who held on for as long as he possibly could. So seeing him go, as sad as it was, you feel relieved. Like, you're just happy that they're at peace and there's no more fighting, there's no more holding on. Like, I'm gonna be okay. No matter what, like, I feel like I've watched him go through so much. From beginning to end, I watched him go through so much. There's no more doctor's appointments. There's no more blood tests. There's no more nothing. Like, I'm happy for you. I am genuinely happy for him. My baby's at peace, and I couldn't ask for anything else. At the end of the day, one thing that I always will be grateful for is that I was told my son has a life expectancy of 3 to 6 years. I made it to see his 6th birthday. Like, I can't complain, because Jay went into end of life care in April, and the prediction was he might not be here for August, and he died in November. I have no complaints. One of the biggest reasons why I want to raise awareness when it comes to his diagnosis, because there's going to be more kids like him, and I want everyone to know about it. I want everyone to know about how special these people are, these individuals are. I want to raise money for them. I look forward to planning his fundraiser for his 3rd year anniversary this year. I just feel like everyone needs to know. No one believed me when I said that, like, my child who is nonverbal has an attitude, this crazy, spicy personality. No one believed me. And I think that's when I started making little clips and videos of him that showed that he knew exactly what he was doing when he was being bad. I just feel like a lot of people doubt people with special needs, and I just didn't want my kid to be doubted. Something that I want them to keep doing is having the Cockayne Syndrome conference every single year that they have one, and it's getting harder to have them because the funding just isn't there. So if I can contribute and throw an event that raises money and raises awareness of my son's diagnosis, I'm definitely gonna do that. The ultimate goal for me is gonna be to throw parties for terminally ill kids. When you find out that you have a dying child, you play no games when it comes to their birthdays. So Jay had big birthdays the second I found out till the end. And if I can raise money for Cockayne Syndrome, but at the same time throw events for other kids with terminal illnesses, that's definitely something I wanna do. My greatest advice to anyone that has a special child and might go through something like what I went through is honestly to just trust your instincts, because you literally know best. Trust your instincts and stay optimistic, stay positive, and just take it one day at a time. Don't be too hard on yourself.
That was Khadija Gayle sharing her story. You can now access Impact online on SoundCloud and Spotify at Vibe105TO. And before we leave, we'd like to extend our thanks to Khadija Gayle and VX3 Exchange.
Impact is a production of VX3 Exchange, featuring the stories of extraordinary people, sharing their stories again and again at vx3exchange.com or our social platforms at VX3 Exchange.